All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Commissioners, the chairman and vice chairman are both absent this evening, so your first order of business will be to elect a temporary chairperson.
Does that not carry over from the closed session?
I don't believe so, does it, Stephen? No.
Okay.
I will nominate Nicole Phyllis as temporary chair for the evening.
Second.
All right, and just a voice vote in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. And we'll take a roll call then. Chairman Flora?
Nope, not chairman.
Commissioner Flora. I
Here.
want you to be chairman. Commissioner Duran?
Here.
Commissioner Phyllis?
Here.
All right, and Commissioner Walton and Commissioner Rosenstein are absent.
So our next order of business is we will do the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next item, approval of the minutes for September 3rd, 2015 meeting will be continued because we do not have a quorum of commissioners present from that meeting here tonight. Our next order of business, special agenda items and announcements pertaining to the Red Board. Tracy?
Two announcements this evening. One is that we placed on the dais a communication from Bill Dawson that we received yesterday, so I wanted you all to receive that. And the other thing I want in the morning will be our annual seminar on maintenance. That will be in the morning at the library, and anybody who's interested in attending should contact our office to register for that. That's all I have this evening.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is item 7, public comment. Request from members to speak to the board on any issue of general interest to the community, but not speaking on any items on the agenda. Do we have any? Okay. Our next item on the agenda was appeal N0240, but this has been withdrawn, so we'll move on to item 12, administrative items. Item 12A is Paul Weinberg, Emergency Services Coordinator from the Office of Emergency Management, and we will hear Paul's presentation now.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you for being here.
Anytime. So we talk a little bit about emergency preparedness. I'm sure many of you are aware that the city is very committed to a community-wide approach of emergency preparedness. We realize that in a city like ours, where we have 95,000 residents and hundreds of thousands of people here every day and weekend, when a disaster happens, we have to be ready. So we've created a community-wide approach, and residents, businesses, schools, tenants, everybody is really a key part of that. Moving into next week is the Great California Shakeout. I hope many of you have heard of this. This is the annual earthquake exercise on 10:15 at 10:15. So next Thursday morning at 10:15, we encourage everybody to practice in the duck, cover, and hold exercise. It's a statewide drill. It's grown over the past 7 or 8 years. There's more than 13 million people that participate every year, and it really is an excellent opportunity to practice your skills of what to do during an earthquake. Earthquakes are our #1 threat in California, and the steps that we take as a city now are going to help us both save lives and property and help us recover when the next big event happens. Drop, cover, and hold is the #1 thing we ask you to do. You'll see a lot of information coming out next week from the Office of Emergency Management, through the press and through our internal notifications about what to do, how to get prepared, and understanding that it really is, it takes an entire community to make us as resilient and then earthquake prepared as possible. Drop, cover, and hold is the #1 thing you can do to protect yourself. I have a couple of slides here related to our tsunami inundation zone and threat, really just because a couple of weeks ago there was the Chilean earthquake, which generated some interest in tsunamis. Our tsunami risk is extremely low. We really are fortunate in Santa Monica to have a couple of geological factors that limit our exposure for the most part to a tsunami risk. That being said, we live in a region where we share the news media with 88 other cities in Los Angeles County, or 87 other cities. So our risk is different than Venice and different than Los Angeles or Malibu and other areas. So when an alert or a warning or a watch is disseminated through the media, it's important to understand for what it means for us, for Santa Monica, and for your constituents, that it really is a low risk. There's two types of tsunamis that we could possibly experience. One is the one that we did experience 2 weeks ago, which was about a 2-centimeter rise in the sea level at 4 a.m. So clearly there was not going to be any damage, but understanding that the city works with our partners in county emergency management and lifeguards to know exactly what our risk was, and had there been any threat to damage to the property or to pier or to people, we have some extensive planning that goes into effect, and we've exercised that plan and created it and piled it on with some signage. So if you've been to the beach or down on Main Street area in the past couple of years, you've seen some new signs pop up, both evacuation route signs, which are shown there in the red line, and tsunami warning. When you come to the Santa Monica beach, we do just provide information saying if you feel a strong earthquake while you're on the beach, it's a good idea to go to higher ground. But I don't want to overemphasize our risk. Our risk is extremely low for damage from a tsunami, but because it was in the news just a couple of weeks ago, I want to just address it. One thing I'd encourage, this is a little different than the normal presentations that I do. Our presentations are very interactive, and we encourage you guys, if you have constituents, buildings, people, groups, organizations that want presentations either at night or in the day, please contact our office. We come out there and we do very thorough and customized presentations for all different groups, and we encourage you. It's a great way to get people informed and prepared. These are the tsunami signs that you have. You see both in the beach and on the downtown Main Street area. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on tsunamis. Earthquake are our number one threats. The way that we do prepare for emergencies doesn't really change in the event. It's really about having a kit, being informed, and having a plan. One of the things we've adopted in Santa Monica is we really want to practice the art of resiliency. We can't prevent or predict disasters, but we can make ourselves as strong as possible when they happen. And resilience is really, it's a step of actions. It's a condition that we hope to get to by purchasing emergency supplies, by training, by working with our partners, which is key. That makes us a stronger and resilient community. Everything we do in disaster response is based on partnerships and pre-existing relationships. So when something happens, we know who to contact. We can get the information out, whether it's the schools, whether it's residents, businesses. We work very hard to keep those connections strong before something happens, so when something happens, we are better able to respond to that. It's a little bit different than what we call as emergency preparedness. Emergency preparedness are the steps that we take to become resilient. So we do year-round trainings and exercise with our city staff and with our internal and external partners. The school district is huge in that aspect. I mean, you think about they're a captive population, and if we can reach the kids to reach their parents, we're getting a good number of the residents involved and active, and it's something that we are very proud of. Procuring supplies, yes, we want individuals to procure supplies. We're launching our I've Got 7 campaign next week, which is a citywide campaign pledging that you've got 7 days worth of emergency preparedness supplies. If we ask you for 7, it's likely people will get 3 to 4, which is better than asking for 4 and having 1. But we want people to really understand that the city is not going to be able to help every person in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. We're going to be busy responding to the major events, and the better prepared you are when something happens now, the better off we're all going to be. And then the trainings, our trainings, again, if there's constituents that you have that could benefit from trainings, whether it's as an apartment building or an organization or a neighborhood group, let us know. There's a incredible interest in getting prepared, and sometimes people don't know, kind of where to go. So come to our office. We do training seminars. It's free, it's fun, and it really helps people get engaged in our community. The best thing that I could ask you to share with your folks is our CERT program. CERT is a nationally recognized program called Community Emergency Response Team. And in the past 3 years, we have trained over 300 members of Santa Monica, people who either live or work in town, in basic disaster response. It's a free 3-day workshop offered on 3 consecutive Saturdays, and it's a lot of fun. The first thing I can say, it's a lot of fun. And we can tell because every class we fill up, we have about 35 people, and on day 1, day 2, and day 3, we have 35 people, which means we're being respectful of their time. They're getting a lot out of it. Some of the other things that we're proud of about the program is these are the force multipliers. These are the people that live and work in town that are going to be able to respond quicker than the police or fire, because many of us city employees don't live in town. So who is here when something happens to have these people trained and vetted, and it's going to give us a head start in our disaster response. We teach basic fire safety. Everybody gets to put out a live fire. Everybody does some search and rescue activities. We talk about how the CERT team is organized, how to be deployed in an emergency. And I'll say that probably the most proud factor of our CERT program is it really is community-wide. And I say that from all ages, abilities, capabilities, it's across the board. So, I mean, we've had just a great diverse showing of people, and it's reflective of our community. And there is no shortage of people wanting to get in. So I encourage you to share that with us. When they join our CERT team, they get to, like I said, put out some live fires. They get to practice. They do some public outreach. They also get to participate in some of our either exercises, or when an incident happens and we can use them, we'll do that. They are very active in the Los Angeles Marathon, which we get every year now. And again, it's a lot of fun. 300 people in groups of 30 who have been trained. So we've had 10 classes. It's a lot of fun watching this group who have never met each other from different classes get together in these events. And again, it's going to make a huge difference when our next incident happens. We talk about planning. We want people to have a kit. We want people to have emergency supplies. We also want people to think about planning. I put a couple of slides here, just lighten the mood. Social media, if you see the exit building before tweeting about it, it's a funny picture, but it's actually true. If you look at what's happened just in the past few weeks and months of different instances, social media is huge. And I would use that as a tool for getting information. The information that the responders utilize in a response is quicker on social media than it is on our regular sources. So keep an eye on social media. Sign up for these, share the information. We rely on social media, but please make sure you're safe before you start tweeting it out. In recognition of Vin Scully missing the postseason, one of my favorite quotes of his, which I understand he took from Woody Allen, is, if you want to make God smile, tell him your plans, Vin Scully. That being said, have a plan. And when we talk about a plan, it's really about having, what are you going to do when a disaster happens and you want to reunify with your family? Have a meeting location. Have a secondary meeting location. Have your phone numbers somewhere other than on your cell phone. I know most of us hit 1 and somebody answers, number 2, my dog answers, number 3, my cousin. Think about when's the last time you dialed all those 10 or 11 numbers that you need to reach somebody. And if you can't remember them off the top of your head, what I recommend is write it down on a small piece of paper, put it in your wallet or in the back of your phone or in your shoe or in your car, somewhere where you've got this information just in case you don't have your phone with you. It's an important part of the response. Earthquake preparedness, we are creatures of habit. Something that I'd encourage you guys and your constituents to do is go home tonight, look around your houses or apartments and figure out, where are you going to duck, cover, and hold if you are at home when an emergency happens? I generally sit in the same spot on the same couch every night when I'm watching TV. I know that hopefully I'm going to get under this particular table when something happens, and I'm going to hopefully beat my wife and kids there. Then and they've got somewhere else to go, a little smaller. But it's think about where you're going to go. Think about at work next time. If something were to happen, where would you go? If something were to happen here today, would you go under these under the dais or the chairs? It's all about practicing this stuff before it happens. The other thing I'd recommend is learn about some other basic earthquake responses, turning off your utilities, encouraging people to know where the gas shutoff is, where the electricity shutoff is. We teach all of this hands-on in our class. It's all available online. You can look at our website or any other website in emergency management. But it's key. If you think about the Northridge earthquake, which was a moderate earthquake, and I have to be very clear about that, that was not the catastrophic event which we particularly expect is going to come at some point, and obviously we don't know when. That was a moderate earthquake. That being said, there were hundreds of gas leaks in Santa Monica, and we had firefighters going door to door, turning off people's gas to prevent fires from spreading. Now we've got a CERT team that can do that, but if individuals can get trained and learn how to do that, it's going to lessen the burden on our first responders. So think about the basics. Go home, find out who in the building knows where the shutoffs are. It's an important thing to do. 90% of all injuries in an earthquake in California are going to be caused by non-structural hazards. They're not going to be buildings. They're not going to be, massive fires. They're going to be unsecured pictures and TVs and speakers and water coolers, things like that that are going to come loose from the walls. Go home, look around, see what you can secure. If you have a gigantic picture frame over, in your living room over the couch, think about securing it, making sure that it's not going to fall during an earthquake. We have a lot of information how to do a basic home hazard hunt, and you can eliminate your risk from 99% of injuries in a disaster by just securing these items. We have simplified our message. Again, it's very simple. It's have a kit, have a plan, sign up for SM alerts, and be informed. When I talk about have a kit, again, our I've Got 7 campaign, you'll see it reaching out next week through our traditional media and our city sources as well. We want people to have the preparedness materials that they would need from the time that a disaster strikes to the time our systems come back online. And all of us are different. So we all have different needs. I may have pets. I may have prescription medication I need. I may have a senior relative that I'm taking care of. My needs are going to be different than every one of yours. But what I recommend you do is you go home, you think about if something had happened this morning at 10 a.m. and the stores and the banks and the freeways were closed for 3 days, what do you need to get through that 3-day period until the systems come back online? First thing I recommend is water. As human beings, water, obviously we need water, generally more than food. You want to have food, you want to have water. If there's prescription medications, you want to see what you can do to procure those. Your pets, your kids, think about what supplies they would need. For pets, you want to have food, you want to have water, you want to have either a kitty carrier or a kennel for the dogs. You want to have all of their shot information as well. This is things that are going to make your response and recovery just a lot easier. We also recommend 7 days food and water. We recommend breaking that up into different locations. So if you can put 3 or 4 days at home, so we're asking for 3 or 4 gallons of water and a couple of cases of power bars or oatmeal and a radio at home and another gallon of water in your car and a case of power bars or whatever it may be, and then something at work, you'll be covered wherever you are and you'll have that 7 days total. It's a different approach to getting prepared. It's not the same as filling up a closet or a garage or a basement with all this material and not looking at it for 5 years. The other thing about breaking it into small pieces is you can cycle through it. So I have a case of water in my car. I go to a soccer game, we drink the water. I go to Vaughn's, I spend $3 and buy another case. It's always going to be fresh. And it's not always going to be used for the big major disaster. It's going to be used for the day-to-day. You get stuck in a traffic jam. Well, great, I have water, I have food, I have a blanket, so whatever it is that you need. But whatever it is, you want to make sure that you've got emergency supplies at home, at work, and in the car. Make a plan. A plan is very important. Again, it doesn't have to be something like a gigantic binder that sits on a shelf and you're going to go X, Y, and Z. It's having a few key items. Meeting locations, a primary, a secondary meeting location, your important phone numbers, an out-of-town contact, and most importantly, in your plan should be texting. After a disaster, cell phones are likely not going to be down. The towers are not going to topple over and disappear and go away. What's probably going to happen is all 14 million Los Angelinos are going to call each other, and we're going to jam up the phone lines, and we're not going to be able to get through. If you're sending a text message and that's part of your plan, you're much more likely than getting a person-to-person connection. You hit send. If it doesn't go through immediately, it's going to keep pushing through the system till it gets through. It'll also lighten the load and demand on the responders to use the system. So think about having texting as a key component. Be informed, like I mentioned, signing up for SM alerts. I hope many of you are signed up. That's the city's emergency alert notification system. We use it day to day for different traffic accidents or police activity or something where we want to inform people how to either stay away from traffic or protect themselves. In a disaster, the SM alert system is going to be used tremendously in getting detailed information out to our constituents, and I just recommend you sign up. Just visit smalerts.net. You can select what you want to be notified for. If you want to be notified for everything that happens in the city, that's fine. You can click that box. If you just want emergency alerts, we'll just send you emergency alerts, and it's a really valuable system. I encourage you guys to do that. With that, it is an overview of emergency preparedness. Do you guys have any?
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
So the first thing we're going to do is turn it over to the commissioners for questions for Paul, and then do we have public comment? Okay. So, Commissioner Flora.
Yes, thank you. Chairwoman Phyllis. Paul, thank you for coming tonight.
Sure.
I really appreciate it. I have several questions that I'll try to do this quickly. Some of them are yes, no. Others I'm asking because I want to kind of reiterate and raise the issue. First of all, you're with the Office of Emergency Management.
Correct.
Now, who's that under? Is that the city manager?
City manager's office. Yeah, that was created under the former city manager back in 2011, and it was really a recognition on his part from his experience in San Diego that we needed more than one person in charge of emergency preparedness. So prior to the creation of OEM, I was under the fire department, and I was doing the same work just as one person. Now we have a whole division,
Right.
and we, as a direct result, the CERT team was created. A lot of other programs, but we. It's important that it's under the city manager's office because it also provides the teeth that we need for buy-in from our internal as well as our external staff, and it's a nice balance between police and fire.
Okay,
That's
good.
why it's there.
So separate within city government, but coordinated very well, given that you are a legacy from the fire
Correct.
department. Okay, that's great. Bear with me, Madam Chair. Do you do training for neighborhood groups at, say, a monthly meeting, or do they have to come to you?
No, it's up to their discretion, and we do it. Like I said,
Because I think that would be great if you were a monthly speaker at some. I know my Mid-City Neighbors group. You'd
Yep.
make a great monthly speaker.
We're glad to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
for example, this morning I did a talk at the 20th Street Surgery Center for 15 of their staff. We do it however it works for you guys. So I've spoken at a number of neighborhood groups. Usually those are early evening. We ask that they have about at least 15 people to make it worth it. But and we can do weekends as well. But no, we customize it to the audience. So it's not
Yeah.
a canned presentation. If it's the Sunset neighborhoods, we'll work with them. If it's Main Street,
Yeah,
it's-
more single family, you'll tailor it to.
Yeah.
More multifamily, you'll tailor it to that.
And one of the benefits from the CERT program is, like I said, we've had attendees from all different aspects of our city. I've done a number of outreach at some of our multifamily residents and mainly Spanish-speaking residents, which are in recognition of this is a community-wide approach. I mean, we have to reach everybody. And getting our community members trained, they're the ones who end up inviting me to these different neighborhood groups. And even beyond the standard monthly meetings, the barbecues. So we'll come out and,
Sure.
we make it fun. So, yeah,
Good.
absolutely.
I have just one more question and then a bit of an editorial, if you don't mind. Our legislative advocate is here this evening. Applause.
Was that him?
Me.
Well, I think that was for you, Brian. I mentioned our legislative advocate was here. And one of the things I'm going to be asking him about, which we barely touched on in our closed session, that wasn't a closed session, it was a preliminary meeting, is there have been several bills about trying to incentivize property owners to retrofit
Yep.
for the big one.
Sure.
Do you all get involved in the advocacy for some of those things, or is that just basically through Debbie and the city? And
It's for the ones that are working on the actual implementation of that. What we do is we work with the tenants, for example, not necessarily the owners, but the tenants of how they can secure their personal space while the larger improvements are being made.
Yeah, so you're more in individual action rather than in grand legislative action.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, very good. Finally, a bit of an editorial. Gas leaks.
Yes.
They're already there. And I know this because we had a very bad gas leak between my building and the neighboring building. And the gas company came out, they took their samples. 4 months later, we were still calling them to close the gas leak. And their response, I wouldn't say it was curt or nonchalant, but it was like, oh, we got tons of these. You're in our queue, but please. And it's kind of like, well, what if we're San Bruno?
Right.
I mean, I live on Arizona, which is a very long street. I live in the College Street neighborhoods. And I can tell you from walking my dog, there were several gas leaks that I could smell kind of along the way, along the road to Centinela.
Right.
And their attitude wasn't cavalier, but they're just outstaffed.
Yeah.
There are a ton of gas leaks out there. So it's not about shutting off the gas. The gas leaks are already there, and that's what scares the crap out of me, quite frankly.
Right.
And if I can just advocate for any nudging of the gas company to work with their contractors, speed up the process a little bit to close these little leaks, which are going to be big in a bad situation, I would ask to do that, because it was a real education for me to realize just how many. I mean, it's kind of like when your friend buys a yellow car.
Right.
suddenly you start noticing all the yellow cars.
Right.
When we had a gas leak, suddenly I started noticing all the gas leaks.
Right.
And they're just all over the place.
Yeah. The one thing I'd recommend.
It's really unsettling, quite frankly.
Right. Well, on a
And
day-to-day.
it's not just a lockout, tag out. It's just they're already there.
Yeah.
And I just would invite you all to push the gas company a little bit more and invite them to push their contractors a little bit more to not just keep taking samples, but, plug the damn leaks.
Sure, and we're glad to work with the fire department, which is our key contact
Yeah.
with utilities for that. But I would say if you smell a gas leak, call it in. I mean, number one, it's important that somebody comes and checks that out. Number two, any of that documentation helps by saying, look, we've had 10, 20 calls.
We finally, so here's what we did. I'm sorry, but bear with me. We had the adjoining building call because clearly the leak was somewhere between the building. When that didn't work, we asked neighbors across the street to call and say, I just live across the street. Then we had to have the fire department call.
Yeah, and I absolutely recognize it.
We had to turn to the fire department,
Yep.
who should be busy doing other things,
Yep.
to make the call, and then the gas company listens to the fire department.
Yeah, and I would continue.
And
to
so
say-
I just encourage you, please nudge SoCal Gas.
Sure.
We
We will as we can, but
yeah.
I would encourage calling the fire
Because
department.
the leaks are already there. That's the scary part. Okay. Thank you. And thank you again for being here.
Absolutely welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Flora. Next speaker is Commissioner Jerome.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
I just have a couple brief questions, and just out of, I guess, general interest. I'm guessing the reason why the tsunami risk is very low here is that because of the geographical location of the city and in the bay, or
It is. I can briefly. What protects us are a couple of factors. Number one, the bluffs are 100 feet tall. And now we err on the side of caution. The experts say a tsunami wave would not be more than 20 feet tall. So we've basically tripled that in our planning. Even that being said, nothing would go above the bluffs. South of the pier in the Main Street area, they've assured us that we would not see anything more than, quote, ankle deep water on Main Street. So it's not what you see in Japan or in some of the previous places. Number one, our beach is I don't know if you guys knew this, it's the widest swath of beach in the country. So for where the shore is to basically the bike path, the sea would have to rise so high to be anything more than ankle deep. So that's really what protects us. Catalina Island, also depending on where a tsunami is coming from, would potentially serve as a barrier for us if it was coming from that side. But our tsunami risk is extremely low. That being said, we do want to educate people that if they're on the beach and they feel a strong earthquake, it's a good idea to go to higher ground, not get in their cars, just go literally up the bluffs, and you'll be safe.
Sure. Okay, well, that's very interesting. Thanks. And the other question that I wanted to ask you is, I wondered whether the I've Got 7, your marketing plan, getting that out, if you're going to, or if the city's going to dedicate time and resources to including that message with the schools.
Actually, did somebody pay you to ask that? That's a great question. If for those of you may remember, we've done this campaign several times. We just haven't done it in the past 3 or 4 years as we're building up this OEM program. The school district is our primary partner in this, and for us, it's a captive audience. And as a parent, we realize that if we get the kids involved, if we get the children to come home and say, hey, Mom, Dad, do you have water in case there's an emergency? Right. There's not a good no answer. It's either, oh my gosh, yes, we're going to go together as a family and buy it today, or yes, I have it. The kids are going to be relentless. They're going to keep banging on them. So the school district is actually our primary partner in this. And I believe this year we've been in talks with them. I believe we're focusing on the 5th, 6th, and 7th grades. And in the past, what we've done is the winning classroom had a pizza party delivered by the fire department. And we've done this every year. It's a fun kind of feel-good deal. A little hiccup we have now is pizza is no longer allowed on the school campuses anymore because of this healthy eating craze. Someday that'll pass, I expect. But so we're trying to come up with a nice a nice party favor that again the city, the police, or fire can deliver to the winning classrooms.
It's a fad.
I don't think so.
Nutrition and anti-childhood obesity, it'll go.
Absolutely.
That's outstanding. That's great. And I can tell you, I have a 6-year-old, so he's in kindergarten right now, and I would, if you're open to suggestions, and can afford the resources to expand that beyond the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, because I can tell you, my 6-year-old, my kindergartner, he would be so gung-ho to have this information and to want to give it to his mommy and daddy, and he would be relentless in making sure that we had bottles and all this stuff. I really recommend pushing it to the younger kids as well, if you could.
I'd say 2 things. I actually also have 2 6-year-olds at home, and they actually love it. And recommendation: 2 games to play is Earthquake and Tsunami. And when they play Earthquake, just say Earthquake, and they tell them to go find somewhere to duck, cover, and hold. What you'll find is they're a lot more. First of all, they're a lot quicker than us, but they get a kick out of doing that. The Tsunami game is a little less friendly. I say Tsunami and they just run, but that's really what we want them to do. But we will. It's not going to be exclusive to those grades. We're targeting those classrooms because the school district feels that is the right age where the kids are going to actually be an active component. The campaign is also open up to all residents, so you'll see this information. I mean, we'll distribute it throughout all our city sources. It'll be in the paper, and your kids will have ample opportunity to play. If your class is interested, send us something. We'll send them something targeted for them. I'll bring it to the school district if they want to open it up to the lower grades. It's fine. It's not like there's a cost of how many people participate. We want everybody. It's community based.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Weinberg. As we have no public comment, I think that wraps up this item. And
All right. Thank you.
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Take care.
Go home and scare your children about a tsunami. Play that game.
And our next agenda item is item 12B. Mr. Brian Augusta, the Rent Control Board's advocate and representative in Sacramento, will present to us a report from the 2015-2016 regular session of the California Legislature. Welcome, Mr. Augusta.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Well, yes, we're towards the end here of the first half of that session. First half of the 2-year session. There's just a few days left for the governor to act on bills that have been presented to him this year. He has until Sunday at midnight to either sign or veto those bills, or in the rare instance where he takes no action, then the bill would become law without a signature. I don't expect that to happen on any of these bills. And then we kind of return to the quiet, deliberative time in the fall when advocates and elected officials think about their bills for next year and spend more time in their districts. So what happened in this first half of the legislative session? Well, of course, 2 big issues that we want to talk about in this conversation are what happened on affordable housing and what happened on issues with respect to landlord-tenant and rental housing. And there were a few notable issues. The first, which we talked about in the study session, but the Speaker of the Assembly, Toni Atkins, took over as Speaker and proclaimed her number 1 priority to be affordable housing, and she held to that. She put in a 4-bill package on affordable housing that did a number of things to expand, primarily focused on the financing of affordable housing. But her biggest bill was AB 1335, concerning funding for affordable housing through a fee on certain recorded documents that would then fund a state housing trust fund or a permanent source of financing for affordable housing. And that centerpiece of her housing package, which requires a 2/3 vote, did not get off the Assembly floor, but it is still eligible to be taken up next year. Still remains one of her priorities. 3 of her other bills did make it through. AB 90, which will deal with how we will use federal housing trust fund monies in California, and 1056, AB 1056, which spells out provides direction on how some of the cost savings from Prop 41 will be used, and tries to focus some of those monies on housing and services for people coming out of our prison system. And then the one with, I think, the biggest question mark around it is AB 35, which is pending on the governor's desk. And this is an expansion of the state low-income housing tax credit program, which, along with the federal low-income housing tax credit program, is one of the primary sources of financing for affordable housing. The state credit, this bill would expand the amount of credits available, and it initially would have expanded it to 300. It was amended sort of towards the end to expand it to 100 million. And it sits now on the governor's desk. He last year signed a tax credit bill for the film industry. It's not clear, particularly if you hear some of his public comments, what he intends to do on this tax credit bill. But it remains one of the speaker's primary priorities. It's the biggest bill that of her four-bill package that has actually made it to the governor. And given the fact that we're, in the last few days of action by the governor on the bills, he's clearly thinking carefully about it. So that's one that housing advocates are watching very closely. Let me just say one other thing on sort of the area of affordable housing finance. The governor signed towards the end of the year. We did the budget mid-year, and we do most of the trailer bills, which are the bills which trailer the budget and which have sort of substantive changes to implement the budget. And sometimes the connection with the budget is pretty loose, but. Those trailer bills can be enacted. They don't have to be enacted concurrent with the budget. They can trail the budget. And towards the end of session, a deal, if you will, came together on sort of the wind down of redevelopment agencies. There's continuing discussion about that whole wind down process, that it was a necessary component of the dissolution of redevelopment agencies. And there's been a lot of fighting between the Department of Finance and local governments about, what pre-existing requirements or pre-existing contracts are ones that the state should pay and which are not. So this bill, SB 107, dealt with sort of reshaping that area of the law. But one of the sweeteners, if you will, in that bill was to give permission to successor agencies that took over the operations of the former redevelopment agencies to use bond funds that had been approved just before dissolution took place. When dissolution of redevelopment agencies was enacted, they froze some of those bond funds on the premise that the money was only bonded against because they knew redevelopment was coming potentially to an end. How does that relate to housing? There's about 100 million of those that are housing-related bonds, which have now are sort of unfrozen and will be available to those handful of entities that fell into that window. Will be available statewide, so that's an interesting development of sort of some unexpected affordable housing money. I'm going to turn our attention now to landlord-tenant issues. A number of interesting bills this year. Let me talk first about two big bills that didn't move forward. One of them relates to the submetering of water, SB 7, which is the latest iteration of a bill that Senator Wolk has carried a number of years now, but has been an ongoing issue for a decade or so, of establishing a mandate to install submeters in new multifamily housing. And that bill has been a focus of both landlord groups and tenant organizations because of the potential landlord-tenant implications of metering for water and billing for water. And what do you do in instances where the meter is malfunctioning, or there's a plumbing problem and the water bill is exceptionally high, or the water bill doesn't get paid? And how much can be charged for the billing and the meter reading? So there's been an effort to try to reach some agreement between the various stakeholders, and SB 7 seemed like those who have been working on this issue are finally getting close. But toward the end of session, some additional amendments were pushed into the bill that would have essentially required license or union plumbers to install the sub-meters, and as a result, that sort of deal fell apart with the landlord groups and builders peeling off. And the bill eventually was taken up for a vote on the floor in the assembly, but got only far short of the majority needed. We expect to see that issue will come back again next year, probably not SB 7, some other vehicle, but perhaps SB 7. And so, unfortunately, we're going to continue to work on that issue for another year. But there remains a lot of interest among the stakeholders, whether it's the builders and apartment associations, tenant advocates, environmental advocates, and Senator Wolk on trying to resolve the issue. Another critical issue that we've talked at your board meetings about a number of times is the issue of bed bugs. The incidence of bed bug infestations has risen dramatically in areas like Los Angeles County, and it's a growing source of tension and conflict between landlords and tenants. And so about a year ago, a number of stakeholders got together to try to work through some of those issues and come up with a set of principles that everyone could agree on with respect to notice to the landlord that bed bugs are there, notice to the tenant about how to respond to bed bugs, who is responsible for treatment, how quickly does that have to happen, what treatment methods must be used. And so that became AB 551 by Assemblymember Nazarian. And there was support from both tenant groups and landlord groups. But as the bill moved through, it became clear that there was really not agreement from all sides on the bill, and there were still a number of issues that needed to be worked through with respect to some of the really important landlord-tenant issues about defenses and what do you do if there is an eviction because a tenant complained or because a tenant did not comply with the notice to assist in the treatment. And so the author agreed to park the bill and get the folks back to the table to try to continue to work through those issues. But a number of other landlord-tenant related bills have gone to the governor, and some have been signed. AB 447 by Assemblymember Mainshine from the San Diego area deals with an issue that's maybe on the periphery a little bit of a bigger issue that has been talked about here at the board, which is discrimination against Section 8 voucher holders. And the bigger issue, as everyone knows, is should a landlord be able to discriminate, if you will, against a Section 8 voucher holder? In other words, we just don't rent to Section 8 voucher holders. That's not this bill. That issue has been dealt with in other states. Was not dealt with this year in California. But what this bill does deal with is a somewhat related problem of insurance companies who insure multifamily housing providers who treat housing providers who accept Section 8 or have other housing subsidies, treat those providers differently, and in some instances refuse to insure them. So AB 447 makes it unlawful to refuse to issue a policy or cancel a policy based on the source of income of the residents, and also prohibits the use of that question on application. If you look at a lot of insurance applications in California, they ask some form of a question about the income of tenants or whether Section 8 is accepted there. And so that would prohibit that practice. What's interesting about, in addition to the protections that provides, what's interesting about that is it removes another impediment for a rental housing provider to agreeing to accept Section 8. Because without these protections, there may be a practical difference that your insurance company either won't insure you or charges a higher rate because you can't find an insurance company that's willing to insure. So that removes one of those impediments. And the governor has signed that bill. Another bill that Governor Brown signed is SB 328 by Assemblymember Hueso, or Senator Hueso. This deals with the issue of pesticides. If a licensed pest control operator comes to spray in a unit, they have to, by law, they have to provide notice to the tenant about what's being sprayed and some precautions that the tenant should follow. But if an unlicensed person, the landlord or their maintenance person, uses a over-the-counter, if you will, pesticide, something that they bought at Home Depot, no notice is required. So 328 establishes that requirement to provide advance notice to the tenant of what's being sprayed and when, and what precautions to take if they have any adverse effect from the spraying after it's been applied. And there's some, requires 24-hour notice, but the notice can be waived with some agreement, but provides some additional protections. Very important, in particular for folks with asthma, and one of the groups that was sponsoring it is a group that's working on asthma issues in California. So again, that was signed by Governor Brown. And then AB 418 by Assemblymember Chu. This deals with domestic violence and the ability of a domestic violence survivor to be able to get out of a lease, to get out of rental housing when they need to do so to get away from their abuser. And so this law has been building over a number of years, but the basic structure of the law is that if the tenant can demonstrate that they've been a victim of domestic violence or human trafficking or elder abuse or stalking, that they can vacate the unit early and get out, even if they have a lease and the lease term has not expired. And initially, the law required that you have the, like a police report or some other documentation, and recent legislation to that, which was going to sunset, changed the nature of how you can prove it, essentially. If you can get a social worker or other health professional and demonstrate that, yes, this person has been victim of domestic violence. And so that was going to sunset, and so the bill has now been made permanent, so the sunset has been removed. But the other important change that was made is that if the law had required that if you do break the lease, you're owed 30 days of rent, even if you're vacating immediately. This shortens it to 14 days. The bill had also sought to require the return of security deposit more promptly, because those two things together, saving a little money on the rent and getting your security deposit back, are going to be critical to getting into the next unit. The security deposit thing was too controversial, so that'll have to wait for another year. But the 14-day limit was enacted, and the governor signed that. So a couple of other bills that are still awaiting action by the governor. SB 655 by Assemblymember Mitchell basically adds mold to the conditions which render a unit substandard or uninhabitable, or substandard, I should say. And it gives authority to those code enforcement or health officials who don't believe they currently have authority to cite mold. And it defines mold. It's described in your packet, but it provides a definition of what is mold that renders a unit substandard. And some of the discussion around that bill was, what kind of mold, and what if it's caused by the tenant, what if it's caused by the landlord, and there was quite a bit of debate about, substandard conditions generally in the law are not whether something is substandard is not generally tied to who caused it. It's just the presence of that condition. And there's a lot of work went into trying to make sure that mold doesn't create some unique circumstance where mold alone is not substandard if it's caused by the tenant. So we're waiting to see what the governor is going to do on that bill. I think there's still a lot of thought going into it in his office. I think lastly, and then of course take questions, I want to talk about the seismic safety bills, and we had a presentation earlier about the importance of and the risk of a significant earthquake. Once again, Assemblymember Nazarian has authored a bill. This year it's AB 428, to try to provide some financing to incentivize property owners to do seismic retrofits on certain kinds of buildings that are at risk of collapse in an earthquake. This bill would provide a tax credit for 30% of the cost. It's capped at $12 million. So in other words, in any given year, no more than $12 million of this tax credit could be utilized by property owners. It sits on the governor's desk. I think the message that we've gotten from the governor's office just generally around tax credit issues, whether it's AB 35 that I mentioned earlier or this one, is that it seems to be his view that those kinds of issues should be dealt with in the budget because they're an expenditure. And so if we're talking about spending money, it should be part of the budget discussion so that we can sort of balance. So he has previously vetoed similar bills, so it'll be interesting to see what happens on that. There were 3 other bills that are listed under seismic safety in your report that also tried to attend to this issue. 2 of them got held in the insurance committee, and 1 of them in appropriations, most likely because either there was no appropriation, or because of the potential cost of the bill. So it remains obviously an important issue, and I know an issue of importance in Santa Monica. And it'll be interesting to see what he does on this. But as we talked about in the study session, I think if it doesn't go forward, if the governor doesn't sign it this year, clearly this issue will continue to be discussed, and maybe it will now become part of the budget discussions, who knows. But obviously an issue of critical importance. So since we spent some time on these issues earlier in the study session, I think I'll stop there and see if there's questions.
So,
Commissioner Phyllis and Brian, I want to thank you for coming down from Sacramento tonight. I know it's a family sacrifice, and
Santa Monica is a beautiful place.
I'm glad you're staying. Apparently, you're staying in West LA, though, not Santa Monica, so we don't get the transit occupancy tax. But we can talk about that with Tracy and the others, and create some sort of regulations for your visits. But in all seriousness, I wanted to bring up a couple of things. Again, a few questions, and then a little bit of soapbox, because I just can't help myself. It's clear to me, the one thing you didn't talk about, so Congress members Bass and Waters,
Yes.
not any unfamiliar names in California politics. We all know Congresswoman Waters has a certain charisma. Congresswoman Bass is a very measured legislator. She was Speaker of the Assembly, called on legislators. Granted, it was late. Would have been much more effective maybe in the winter, for a freeze in the Ellis Act.
Yes.
And we heard crickets.
Right.
When our general counsel, Stephen Lewis, and I met with our legislators, particularly Assemblymember Bloom, he was, I think, and to his credit, very honest with us. There's no appetite to deal with Ellis. It's like MICRA. It's untouchable. We tried Prop 45 with MICRA. Didn't work. I just find it, and this is, I don't think it's even a question. I'm just making a statement, and it can just float out there, and you don't even have to respond. I just find it interesting that, I mean, granted, the pro tem is, all energy, all transportation, all the time. But that these members of Congress, one of whom was a speaker, got crickets on the Ellis Act. And I just think that's very telling, given the crises in very expensive cities like San Francisco and the rising, and by the way, every single digit Ellis Acts are single digits too many as far as I'm concerned in the city of Santa Monica. So
Okay.
you don't necessarily have to comment, but if you'd like to, feel free.
Well, the only comment I would make, Commissioner Flora, is that I think the last chapter in that has not been written. I do know that the local governments who are impacted by that we're obviously, thought that was a good opportunity to raise the issue, and I think they're starting to bring that message back up to Sacramento. I mean, as you pointed out, it being the fall now, when we're kind of in between the session, I think is actually a great time, because now is when people are thinking about what can be done next year.
Oh, okay.
The
Good.
politics of that particular issue are very complex and pretty tough, but
Yeah.
but I know it's on the minds of legislators who represent those cities in which
And-
Ellis is.
And as you know, speaking with us, we've got some things that deal with the, I think, very moderate things that deal with over punitive activities that talk about more of the abuses of the Ellis Act that you would think moderate legislators could stomach, but we should talk more about that at the beginning of the year. Also, I do want to make a pitch for, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, you might be now, thanks to Tracy and the staff, I'm sure, but Commissioner Phyllis and I make up the legislative subcommittee. We have been having trouble getting together, but for all of our fans watching, and we know you're out there, a subcommittee on the Rent Control Board, because there are only 5 elected commissioners, we can't have more than 2. Because it can't make up a majority. But we have the legislative subcommittee, and we really would like to connect with you, I think, early in the legislative session, wouldn't you agree, to talk about some priorities and to talk about not only what we should do when we meet with our legislators, whether it's at Housing California in April or down here in the district offices with or without you with us physically, but meeting with other legislators. I mean, Adrien Nazarian's been a friend of mine for 15, 16 years. He's clearly active on a lot of landlord-tenant issues, and though he's not always been progressive on other issues, he seems to be on the right side of several of these issues. I would like to make sure that we're letting other folks know that we in Santa Monica are watching their work, and in an era where everybody, even in new term limits where everyone's looking to run for a statewide office, they might actually care that Santa Monicans are watching what they're doing. So just let's keep that in mind as well. And talking about Assemblymember Nazarian's bill, this is a tax credit. Okay, so it's spending because a tax credit costs money. Forgive my soapbox, Commissioner Phyllis, but we have a governor that we have twice elected with large majorities, who, there's been many Jerry Browns throughout the years, but the one Jerry Brown that has remained is a Jerry Brown that doesn't like to spend money. Unless it's, of course, for a train. Now, I'm for the Hyperloop, I'm for high-speed rail, I'm for the Expo line. I wish our planning department understood parking lots, but that's a story for a different time. But I just really don't get what it's going to take on earthquake retrofit. And we have some property owners here tonight, and maybe this is an area where they're going to agree with Commissioner Flora, that's me, that we need to empower our property owners to make some investments to really be saving a lot of money and a lot of damage in the future. And I would think we could here's one where we could be pairing with the insurance lobby. I mean, they're not going to want to pay out all of these claims if we could retrofit buildings better. I don't see why we don't pair with the insurance lobby a little bit better on pushing the retrofits. But this governor isn't going to spend $12 million. I mean, it's on his desk and he has to think about whether or not to spend $12 million. The state probably spends that much on printing every year. So, I mean, we're in pretty bad shape if we can't convince a progressive governor, as tight-fisted as he may be with our tax dollars, to spend $12 million on earthquake retrofit. And I hope that this is something where we can pair with Elaine, you're back there, where we can pair and partner with you all and push for some sensible solutions to earthquake retrofit. Because I think this is one where we really need to, as long as it's sensible about how much the renters have to take on for these these investments, where we should be pushing this governor. I mean, it's penny wise and pound foolish, or vice versa, not to be spending this money. So that's my soapbox for tonight. It just baffles me why, it's like living in California. We've put our head in the sand about water. Now we're putting our head in the sand about earthquakes. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we were in Minnesota, would I have to teach you that you need to buy a jacket? No, you just know you need to buy a winter coat. Why do we need to be taught that we need to invest in earthquake retrofit and in recycling and saving water? It just, so anyway, that's my diatribe for tonight. But honestly, Brian, I really hope we can work together to push that, because earthquake retrofit just absolutely baffles me. And finally, I'm glad to see that there was some movement on Section 8, and it sounds like we did have some successes. And I did have a question for the gallery, and I don't know if this is out of order.
Let's see.
Okay, let's just throw it out there. But I'm curious about the union installation of sub-meters. Is it more important to have sub-meters, or is it more important to have them non-union installed? That's not meant to be a loaded question. I'm really asking.
If we want speakers to, or
Sure.
if there's someone who wants to speak
Just
to
an open-
Commissioner Flores' question, you can put in a chip.
Because the associations
respond.
clearly had an issue with the sub-meters being installed by union, but I'm just curious what's more important, that they be non-union or that they get the sub-meters that they want. So I'm curious what's a bigger priority. That's not so much a question for you, but out there in the ether. Thank you, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I think that Commissioner Duran.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate the time that you and the travel away from family to give us our presentation. And you've raised some good questions that we can ponder, and hopefully get together with the subcommittee so that we can take some progressive actions moving forward, and really be active in helping you do what you do up there so that we can get what's best for our constituents down here. Thank you so much.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I look forward to the subcommittee's first meeting. I will be there.
Okay.
Will you be on the conference call?
Or whatever, yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Augusta.
right, thank you.
Okay. As we have no speakers on this item, our next item is adjournment. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all.